What are your scariest childhood encounters? My childhood encounter. I was between 7 to 8 living in my old small town, Mathis, Texas, in case anyone is curious, and this is like 1979 roughly. I always played outside after school in both front and back yards. On this day I was in the front yard messing with my bike. I was obsessed with putting WD-40 on the chain like constantly. Anyway, I'm about to leave my yard and get on the street when I see this cat-like thing. It almost had a head like a lion, but portioned with a normal-sized cat. It was standing in the middle of the road. I stopped and just stared. It turned its head, and I swear it smiled at me. The head was very mane-like. It then slowly walked off down the road into what used to be a cornfield. Needless to say, I then ran in, told my mom, did not believe me as I had a wild imagination, but I know I saw it. I'm now 50 years old, and the memory is as confusing and clear as the day it happened. The only odd part of this story? Less than a month later, my mom was admitted to a psychiatric hospital as I found her wandering the same street unaware of who I was. Sometimes I think it was a bad omen or sign. Japan is full of monsters. I grew up in Okinawa, Japan because I was a military brat. My father and his friends, along with my younger brother and a few of our father's friends' sons, would go fishing deep in the woods at a secluded fishing hole that only locals would typically know of. So one day it was almost time to go, and my father instructed me, my youngest brother, and the other guy's 2 sons to start toting the extra fishing gear back to the car, which was probably a little less than half a mile away. It was at that point that I realized that a lot of the Japanese manga/anime and Pokemon folklore they put on TV isn't completely fiction-based. They are really telling us about cryptids that they have known existed since the beginning of recorded history. I know a lot of people get on these sites and post make-believe stories for likes, but I have never been as terrified and as puzzled as I was by this event. Mind you, 4 people saw it. It was broad daylight, and none of us were old enough to be influenced by any sort of drugs. Did I miss something here? The story is that Pokemon and anime exist and are probably based off of actual legends, and that's creepy? I think part of this must have got cut out, and unfortunately it sounds like that was actually the only interesting part. Creepy new job? Thoughts? I recently started a new job at a 1920s cinema. Everyone swears it's haunted. So far, I've been given all the ghost stories and tips on how to get by. Even still, I'm honestly terrified to close alone, which is shocking considered I can't exactly say I'm a paranormal believer. Apparently, past employees have quit due to fear and fear alone. It's that daunting. Although there are some daytime phenomenon, once the lights are out, there is a complete mood change. I was told not to be surprised if the cinema becomes louder at night, and not to be shocked if doors mysteriously pop open. The best tips I've gotten so far: bring a flashlight, play music, be quick, and run if needed. I feel the most uneasy about double-checking all the theater doors are closed/locked. It's the last step of closing. At the very end, once the lights are all out, I'll have to run into the dark abyss, as shown. Can you see the door in that photo? It's so dark. I have to do this alone, to all 7 theaters. Ugh, and the feeling of doing this is vile. I would hate for one to pop open. Psychedelics and the Shadow People. 5 years ago, when I was 16, I was struggling with the sudden death of my father, and I spent most of my days just getting high on anything I could possibly buy. At the time, I was cheating on my girlfriend, and honestly, I didn't care. I was so fueled and blinded by all the stuff I was taking, I just genuinely didn't care. One day, the girl that I was cheating with brought some acid tabs to the house and offered a trip in the mountains. At this point in time, I've already seen this shadow-looking being in my peripheral view several times, but I was taking so many different forms of drugs at the time, I just blew it off as hallucinations. So as I'm driving this girl up the mountains, waiting for the tab to hit, I see the shadow person in the back seat. But when I turn around to look, there's nothing there. Yet again, I just brush it off as me being a tweaking F and just seeing things. I park the car on this cliff by a jungle overlooking the city, and I see the shadow person again in my peripheral view just standing in the jungle. The acid was starting to kick in, so I didn't want to freak her out by letting her know what I saw. But to my surprise, after I glanced to look at the shadow person, she just looks at me and says, "Have you been seeing him too?" And good God, I freaked out just as much as she did. We just came to a conclusion that maybe he's just someone in a different frequency watching us. We kind of forgot about it and drive home, and as I'm just dozing off to sleep, the lights in my bathroom turn on when there's literally nobody inside. I look at the space under the door and all I could see were the legs of the shadow man. I gathered every single bit of strength and opened the door only for the lights to turn off and see nobody inside. I haven't seen the shadow man in years. It was a really bad time for me when I would see him, so maybe he was just a manifestation of all my bad energy? I don't know, never really got to speak to anyone about this. Opinions and comments are more than welcome. Definitely sounds creepy, but at the same time I would say that if you were regularly taking fairly hard drugs, seeing humanoid figures isn't uncommon, which also explains why your partner in drugitude might also see a shadow person. We tend to seek out human shapes and faces. At least I hope that's what it was for your sake. My room is starting to freak me out. Hi, this may be nothing, I'm not sure. For the last month, my room has been ice cold. I have to wear sweats and wrap myself in 3 huge blankets to feel warm. I've also noticed I'll wake up at 3 a.m. every night. Recently, I've also just felt really depressed when I go into my room. Should I cleanse the space? Am I just freaking out over nothing and my anxiety is getting to me? The crying noises. In 2019, I woke up in the middle of the night out of nowhere, but I couldn't move and I couldn't breathe. I couldn't speak, and I was hearing very strange noises on the other side of my wall, which is shared with the living room. I played it off as sleep paralysis because after a while the noises stopped and I could move again. I can only describe the noises as wailing from maybe a woman or a child. I really thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me, but then my mom's door opened, whose room is right next to mine, and she checked up on our dog who was sleeping in the hall. Our dog shook himself awake, I heard his collar jingle as he shook, and this also made me try to hold on to the thought that I was the only one that heard this noise because my dog barks at every single thing, and yet he slept through the crying. I was restless for a little while until I was able to go back to bed. The next morning, my mom's boyfriend, at the time I left for work and my mom was driving me to school, when she told me that her and her boyfriend heard weird crying sounds out in the living room. I told her that I had heard the same thing, but that I did not get up to see what it could have been because I thought it was just sleep paralysis. This happened again 2 more nights before it completely stopped, and I still don't understand what could have caused this sound. A weird thing that happened after the noises stopped was that my mom was alerted that someone she knew had passed, and after the news was shared with her, we never heard those specific noises again. You know, I was sticking with the sleep paralysis right up until you talked about your mom and her boyfriend hearing it. Did they keep hearing it after that one night? Maybe you were making a noise and didn't realize? Sleep paralysis is a heck of a thing, so it could be possible, but I don't know. That's pretty freaky. Woke up this morning to the sound of someone breathing in the corner of my room. So a few weeks ago, my brother moved out to go study, and I've been living alone since. I started sleeping in his room since his bed was queen-sized and had plenty more blankets. This morning, I woke up around 5:20 with the sound of what I originally thought was someone cutting wood outside until I realized the sound came from between the dresser and my closet, about 4 feet in front of me. In a moment, it became very clear that it was the sound of someone breathing heavily, like they just ran a marathon. I just stared at the empty space and was super confused. I checked my phone to see if it wasn't some weird song playing out a video I left on, but the sound was very clearly not coming from there. I called out to see if someone was in my house, to no response but the breathing. After about a minute, I decided to flash the spot with my phone camera, and the sound stopped after about 2 seconds. I checked the whole house, and there was no one. I'm usually the type of guy that gets scared crapless by this kind of stuff, but I'm just left very confused as to what happened. Haunted school. As a kid, I went to a school that was renowned for being haunted. It was built in the 1910s, but somewhere in the mid-1950s, there was a devastating fire that burnt the whole top floor, and many children died that day. They rebuilt the building without the top floor, making it a 2-story building with a really creepy basement. I have a few stories to share about this school. There was always an eerie feeling about the school. If I was walking around alone, I felt like I was always being watched. The wall of one of the staircases was filled with paintings of children that former students have painted. These paintings took up 3 floors of staircases. Every time my friends and I passed by these paintings, we would find something different. A soccer ball that was never there, a girl with a flower that was never there, etc. One day, we decided to take note of specific things to see if they were the same the next day. This was the time of no phones, so no pictures. One note that we took was that the one girl in the painting was smiling and looking toward the right at her friends with a flower. The next day, the girl was looking straight directly at us with no smile. We then avoided that staircase at all costs. The school had a boiler room that you could peek into from the outside, but we weren't allowed inside. Sometimes at recess, when we were playing around that area, we would see white apparitions dart around inside. When we would look through the window, nothing would be there. Being kids, we were a bit curious though. One day we were having an event after school and decided to go up to the boiler room door and try to open it. Barely, since our parents were in the gymnasium next to it. When we turned the knob, it was locked. So we knocked on it, 3 times to be exact. Immediately, we got 3 knocks back from the other side and the doorknob started rattling like it was going to open. We all ran for the gymnasium and never looked back. The story is also about the boiler room, and it may sound absolutely crazy, but I swear it's true and one of the craziest things that happened to me. Once, when I peeked in from the outside, I saw a huge pipe in the middle of the wall extending into an abyss. At the edge of the pipe was a girl's body just laying there, presumably dead. I told my friends to look, but by the time they peeked in, it was gone. For about a month from that day, I kept having nightmares of a girl in black hair, pale skin, begging me to help her. It was always the same dream, and when I asked her what she needed help with/from, the dream would end before she could tell me. Creepy. This is a story I heard from the janitors who spent the night at the school. They were in the janitor's office in the basement one night just chatting and having some snacks when they heard kids laughing. It gradually got louder and they started hearing multiple kids laughing, balls bouncing, playing, running around, etc. They went into the gymnasium where the sounds were coming from and they immediately stopped. They found one singular ball in the middle of the gym and it rolled over to them. Anyways, they eventually broke down the school and now they've built houses on the lot. Thanks for listening. I also came from a school that was supposedly a little haunted, though frankly the only evidence there was a picture of a ghost in an auditorium seat. Clearly a trick of double exposure, but we had fun with it. My exploring the school at night with friends had multiples of us talking about things we saw and heard, but honestly, I just think empty schools at night make weird noises, and teenage brains plus adrenaline leads to seeing and hearing stuff that isn't there. A ghost in the forest. This actually happened to me today in the morning. I woke up at 5:30 a.m. and there was a lot of fog, quite dense that you couldn't see a block away clearly. So I decided to walk to the public forest that is close to my house. I wanted to walk and take pictures. I walk a bit into the forest, and while walking into a path that leads to a crossroads where is a cross of a taxi driver that was killed like 15 years ago. The forest is safe actually, but things may happen rarely. There's a little hill on the left side of the path which I could see good, only in a grayish-blue hue because of the fog. I reached the cross path where the cross lines and the cross was down with a concrete like if someone had pushed it down. I felt that I should raise it up again, but it looked quite heavy and felt lazy at the moment. I wonder if it was the spirit of the taxi driver wanting to lead me to his cross and help raise it. I didn't feel anything evil or mean. It was a calm moment and actually felt calm myself too. I don't do drugs or have mental disorders that could lead me to hallucinations, and where I saw him wasn't foggy, just a bit gray-bluish pale like because of the surrounding morning light with the fog. I lived in a haunted house during my childhood. I haven't talked to anyone about what happened in this house other than my family because other people would call me crazy, and I just want to post this here to see if anyone has had anything similar happen to them, or if somebody can explain the things I have seen. I lived in this house from when I was born to 6 years old. I lived with my parents and my 2 older sisters who were both 16 and 17 years old. My sister would tell me now how when I was a baby, I would stare at the wall and start crying and pointing at the air and how I went crazy. This would happen regularly. I don't remember much as a baby, but my sisters now tell me that they would always see and hear things around the house. Years later, we moved out, and every now and then I drive past it, and that place gives me the shivers. I was always scared as a kid in that house, could never go alone into any room at night. There is something off about that house. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.